I'm not here to give you any value today, and I'm most certainly not here to give you the solution to all of your problems. I'm simply here to talk to you about my journey, who I am, and how I got to the position I'm in right now, which is coaching individuals, signing up for an Ironman, and losing a significant amount of weight. Disclaimer, if you see me looking over to the side here, I have my notes in front of me because I have ADHD and I want to stay on topic for this video. To start off with, who is Ethan.Couper? So I'm nobody special. I grew up in a very average family, a very average household. I have one brother, and I never really was the most spectacular person. I grew up overweight my whole entire life, significantly overweight. And it was hard because at the start you're young, you don't really know what's going on, you don't really care about your appearance, I guess you could say. So I would always just think it's fine. And I was a big snacker as a kid. I'd have like my iPad in front of me and I would always be doing things that were more sedentary. I was more of a static person. And I remember I got into soccer. I grew up in a big soccer household, hence why I have this scarf up there. I'm family from Liverpool. Like, I'm as British UK as you can get. But what I really wanted to talk about is that I was always an overweight kid. And I got into soccer at a young age. And getting into soccer was awesome because I was able to get out, be active, and find a little bit of fulfillment inside of my life. And I played that for majority of my childhood. Like, I remember playing like the Timbits League. We had like this little where you wear like colors and stuff like that. And then I advanced into more of like a rep level of soccer. And through that time, I've moved 3 times in my life, which moving at a young age, if anyone understands that, it can take a toll on your mental. It can definitely, as you build relationships, I'm in my development stages of my life, and I found that after I kind of got out of that phase, the second time I moved, it was really when I was around like grade 6, I was around 11 or 12 years old, and that's where people start to care a lot about their perception of others and how they're viewed and stuff like that. And you're in your preteen years, and I remember just being that kid who was overweight, and I was very insecure at this time. I was very, very insecure at the way I looked, the way I kind of talked, and I almost put on this masked persona. And to preface this, as someone who is very emotionally intelligent, as of like right now, looking back at my past, I was always a people pleaser. I would always try to neutralize situations, conversations. I would always try to be that guy who is agreed with all the time with other people, whether or not someone disagreed or agreed with me, which made getting along with super easy, but it didn't make the ability of me jeopardizing my needs and wants as a person any better. But what it didn't do is allow me to fully respect and appreciate myself and my needs and wants. Being a people pleaser allowed people to manipulate, use, and just walk over me. I was kind of like that guy that said, hey, I need you to do this for me. I'm like, yep, me doing it. But I realized that process prolonged over my whole childhood into my adolescence only got me hurt. And the reason why I'm saying this is because we live our lives in this image of what everyone views of us, and we never get to fulfill or understand our own potential because, quite honestly, we're not even aware of it. And if there's one thing I've learned, people in life will only meet you where they are at. And that really brought a lot of color into my life once I was able to figure out and appreciate that and just respect it. And at that time, I was kind of getting picked on. Like, I got picked on through a lot of my childhood, like even before I moved the 3rd time, because I moved 3 times. And I was in kindergarten when I moved the first time, and then I was in grade 5 when I moved the second time. Or no, I was in kindergarten when I moved the first time, and then I moved when I was in grade 3, and then I also moved when I was in grade 6. And throughout those times, especially the second and third time, I got picked on heavily at school. You know, just get called fat. You'd basically be the one that people would target. And it got to a point where it hurt me a lot, but I would always kind of take it in and then never do anything about it. And why I'm saying this is because today I've been struggling. I still struggle to this day to actually be able to appreciate myself and understand that things that other people say or thoughts or things that are like embedded deep within your subconscious are not you. They're not who you are as a person. And to unlearn those things is really hard, because it's almost like if you get a cut, you have a scar, and those scars are on you forever. So I'm not essentially going to be perfect, but I'm going to be better at dealing with those things. And I really try to articulate that inside of my social media page for people to understand, especially when it comes to changing your physical appearance. Your mental has to change with it, because if it doesn't, you will be stuck. And yeah, I got picked on. I remember I leaned heavily. I got introduced into vaping at a young age, so I started doing that. And it was kind of like filling a void inside of my life, and I thought it was cool, right? Because you're fitting in with people and this and that. And then I remember I transitioned into grade 9 when I got into high school, and this is really where character development started to take place. And a lot of people understand this, even some people watching this video maybe, of just trying to fight for an image. It's like Hunger Games for people wanting to be seen and met and heard. And I got picked on even worse there, and that really hurt me a lot, because I cared a lot about my image and who I was and how I was viewed. And that really took a toll on me. Like, I remember so many times where I just generally didn't want to show up to school. I didn't tell people. I avoided a lot of things. I skipped class. I remember there was one time where I was so fed up with it, and it was really interesting because that's when the pandemic happened, when COVID started. And I remember I faked being sick for 3 days because I didn't want to go back to school. And I was like praying that I wouldn't go back to school. And coincidentally, COVID happened, and I felt this biggest sigh of relief. But in that moment, I started to lean even heavily into the food to fill an emotional void. So I remember I'd make like those Mr. Noodle packs, like ramen. I'd make like 3 packs of those things and eat a shit ton of just carbs and garbage. And I was getting, in Canada here, we have Tim Hortons, so I was getting ice caps. It's literally like a slushie of just caffeine and straight sugar. And I fell into this kind of rut, this pit where I was doing that, and then I was still vaping. And I was never really big into alcohol or smoking. I was never one of those guys. I had enough, I think with God, morally was strong enough in that sense. And then it kind of came down to, throughout COVID, I really was isolated, and I just played video games, and I'd sleep through class, and I didn't really know much. It was a very, I want to say, gray area of my life, and it could be for a lot of people, but it really was me being able to fill a void of running away from all of my problems. And then fast forward to grade 11, I went back to school. COVID kind of ended, finishing off my high school, and that's when everything kind of changed. And I noticed that I wasn't getting picked on as much, but I carried these wounds that I never healed. So my character flaws really showed because I was having more anxiety with myself. And I started to get in as well, even through the pandemic, into music production. And I'm really grateful. I have a friend named Lee. If you've seen this video, I'm super grateful for you, but he was a huge impact on my life. And Lee's doing phenomenal for himself. If you guys don't know, he's a multi-platinum producer. He's fire. But Lee really saved a lot of things about myself that I'm very grateful for. To have deep conversations with someone online who lives in an opposite side of the world. He lives in New Jersey, and I'm over here in Canada. And to have someone who lives in another country who genuinely understood and treated me like what the first time I felt like being treated properly was, and someone who'd check in with me. And you know you're emotionally damaged when the feeling of someone checking up on you, you feel it. And you don't just feel it, you genuinely feel, like I felt emotional that someone showed up and cared and said something about how I'm doing. And I'll never forget that. And then, yeah, I met, around grade 11, I met a girl who I thought was going to be my partner for the rest of my life. I guess it's like your first love kind of thing. And it was nice because I got a break and I met someone who kind of had similar morals to myself. But at the same time, I learned a lot about myself. And for people who don't know, getting in a relationship is a lot of commitment and it's a lot of learning. And I love to say this because I'm grateful for everything that's happened to me, good or bad, in my life, because it's taught me lessons along the way that I never would have known had I not experienced them. And being in a relationship really taught me a lot about myself. I really started to understand things. I started to understand that I wasn't the man that God wanted me to be. I wasn't becoming the man. I was just complacent. I was immature, and I wasn't showing up in the ways that I should have. And at the same time, right, everyone has their imperfections and their flaws, right? I wasn't perfect, nor was my partner at the time. But the thing I took away from it is that I was overextending myself a lot of the times. My people-pleasing habits really came out here, and I didn't respect myself. I didn't really speak up on things how I wanted to be treated. And that was just living a lifestyle my whole entire life of being conditioned to never be enough, or to always put other people on a pedestal and not respect my own needs and boundaries and wants. And I remember I gained a significant amount of weight. I would kind of say I was bulking, but I later reflected on it and I realized that I wasn't bulking. I was just getting fat. I got into powerlifting as well. Powerlifting was a super awesome time for myself because I hit some of the craziest things ever that I did not know I could humanly do. Like, I remember benching 255 pounds at 140 pounds body weight. And then I remember I was squatting 360 pounds at 140 pounds body weight. And that moment for me in the gym, I felt very fulfilled in that sense. And at this time, I also gave up vaping at the end of high school when I did get into the gym. I got into the gym at the end of high school, and I thank my buddy Carter for getting me into that position because I replaced drugs with going to the gym. That was the best decision I made in my life because quitting nicotine was the hardest thing in my whole entire life. And I remember just going to the gym, just doing the motions, showing up, doing these massive 2-hour workouts that I get TikTok things and be saved at the end. And I didn't really see much progress, but it was nice for me because it was like a mental, like I got to take away from that stuff and I was like working towards something. And as someone who's hyper focused and hyper successful with myself, that was like one of the greatest things I experienced. And anyways, and when I got through powerlifting, I remember hitting a lot of crazy PRs, but I just wasn't happy. And then as I graduated out of high school, I got into a co-op with an electrical company and I started the trade up. And I did that through my end of high school and through the summer. And at this time, oh no. No, okay, we're back at that. And anyways, and when I got through powerlifting, that was around the second year I was inside of the gym. The first year I was inside of the gym, I was very concerned about my appearance. I starved myself. I lost a significant amount of weight, but not in a healthy way. I would genuinely starve myself. I was still getting out of vaping at the time, and I realized that I wasn't a healthy person. I was skinny fat, I was insecure, and I had a lot of issues with eating and stuff like that. And I want to say I borderline had an eating disorder because I thought that eating food was going to get me fat. And it's hard to admit that because I struggle with it still at times. And I had a very negative bias towards food, and I was so obsessed with just getting in shape, getting shredded, because I wanted people to validate and appreciate me. But I realized later that that wasn't the point. That wasn't. And throughout my powerlifting journey is when I really started to put on the weight, and I ignored it because I had like this comfort, this emotional void. I was very complacent with myself at the time. And I remember seeing this hybrid athlete training on Instagram. Luke Hopkins, he's a guy, BPN. He really came across my page, and also Fonz Ian came across my page. And those two guys really kind of brought some light. And the biggest inspiration I had is Jake Engelke. And Jake Engelke popped up on my page, and that was the guy who really changed a lot of things for me. And believe it or not, if he sees his video, if he doesn't, cool. But if he does, I'm grateful for you. And I got into running. I was doing like 3K runs, like 4K runs. I was trying my best to. I was overweight at this time, right? This wasn't my powerlifting, but I was kind of shifting to it. And at the time, I had a coworker, and his name was Jalen, and he was awesome because he actually brought me into the running. He got me kind of into running as well. At the same time, I was watching these guys on TikTok, but I was also running myself. And when I got through that, we'd go out for runs. Like, we'd have weekly runs. It's so cool because like at construction, at break, we'd have like a run club. So we'd have 3 or 4 guys after a Friday, because we'd finish early at 1 p.m. We'd all go for like a 5K run. And that was so fun, especially doing it in the winter and stuff like that. And Jalen, I'm grateful for you if you're seeing this too. And that was a great moment of my life. It really brought that to myself. And then I realized that I couldn't balance the two, and I ended up straining my IT band. So I had to take a huge break from running, which made me feel even more of an emotional void. Because as someone who has ADHD, I'm beginning to not classify it as ADHD and just say it's biologically we're human. But when with ADHD, you get novelty and you want to be doing as many things as you can at one time. And I will tell you guys that runs you to the ground. That generally runs you to the ground. You can't be everything you want. And I tried for so long living in so many identities and masking my emotions and doing all that stuff that people say is signs of ADHD, but it's really just avoid filling in because you have beliefs and patterns emotionally controlling that. Anyways, after getting into the running, I ended up, and that's when I really packed on those pounds, and I was drinking a lot more too. I was never a big drinker. Morally, and I know this was from God, like silently tapping inside of my brain, but I was never that guy that was super fired up to go to the bars or anything like that. I never really enjoyed it. And a lot of people, especially when you're 19, 20, and 21, people are doing that all the time. I was never that kind of person. And I think I've just seen in my life poor substance abuse and just family things, and not just seeing your family struggle with stuff like that, especially alcohol and stuff. It really put a bad imprint on my brain, and I realized that I actually feel bad for people that were in that position, because I was filling a void in my life at one point, and I realized I had the conscious awareness, and it was like God tapped into my brain and said, hey man, don't do that. There's more to life. There's more fulfillment. There's more enjoyment than doing drugs. And I was never really that big guy, but I was drinking a lot at the time. I was going out, even getting shit-faced. And I just remember the fall that year. And then I remember buying my first car. I was very good with my money at this time. I was saving every cent. I wanted my first car so bad. I was grinding over the summer through my first year of my apprenticeship, just saving every penny I could. I think I spent like $15 a week. I was so frugal. I was like relying on the Tim's app to buy myself iced coffees in the summer. And I ended up buying my first car, which was the 2022 Volkswagen GLI. For those you don't know, at 19 years old, I was so happy. I grew up with not a lot. I grew up with not a lot, but I was taught from my family to work my ass off for the things that I wanted in life. I'm very grateful for it. I remember even when I was 15, I got my first job doing dishes. I was working like 12 to 13 hour shifts, getting off at like 1 a.m., 2 a.m., coming home, going to school the next day. And then I was working at Sobeys in the meat department. It was the greasiest job ever, but it was like cleaning basically meat guts in a cold 2-degree cellar room. And you had to wear like these lab coats, and you literally looked like you were a surgeon of some sort. And I remember just grinding out like 40 hours a week in grade 10, 11, and 12. And then I obviously got into the trade. So I already had that experience of what work ethic is. And I learned from a very young age from my parents that I'm grateful for is I never got everything. I was never that kid also that got everything. I was taught that if I want something, I had to work for it. And I was like, I bought my first computer in COVID because I worked my ass off. I was sleeping in class. Like we had COVID masks on. I was sleeping every class because I was just tired from coming home from work. But it taught me a lot. And I'm grateful for it because the discipline and the work ethic and understanding the value of things in life is one of the greatest skills you can develop. I was never spoon-fed anything. And fast forward to buying my car, it was like, wow. Like a brand new 2022 was black, had black rims, it had Apple CarPlay, it had like a digital screen in the front. I was like, dude, I did this. And it was like that first win, that first sense of like, I got this. But it's interesting because value items don't actually fill voids inside your life. But what I've learned months later is that valued items are meaningless. It's like you get to that point, you're like, okay, now what? There's more to life than a value thing. And as us humans, we always compare ourselves to things on the internet and people around us, but we never appreciate and understand that we should be grateful for everything that we have going on inside of our lives. We should be grateful for the relationships we have, the ability to wake up every day and see sun, to have a roof over our heads. And so attaching yourself to an outcome, a valued item, is running you to the ground. And that's where I think a lot of us struggle with. And I'm grateful I figured that out at 21 years old, but I know there's people out there, and I've even worked with people that are in their 50s or 40s or 30s that haven't even understood that. Or they're aware of it, but they don't take the action on it. And I remember at that point having that car was super big for me, but I was financially pressured into huge, like 10% interest car payments, paying like $500 a month on insurance because I'm like 19 years old with my own insurance policy. And I remember working over the fall of that year because I bought it in August of 2023. And at that time, I was going through relationship problems. And that was when, in the fall there, I went through my first breakup after 2 years. And I don't open up, I don't hold any remorse, any grudge on the person I was with. She's an amazing person, and I wish her the best. But I realized that my tendencies, the person I was, that I wasn't the man for that relationship because I didn't set boundaries. I didn't respect myself. I was always people-pleasing. And as a man, you can't do that. Your development as a man, you can't provide and set up a family and live and fulfill the needs of what God wants from you by always sucking up to other people. And it's interesting because even now mentioning that, it's like I can feel the subtle part of my identity creeping up. It's like, no, like the people pleaser. It's like, no. I feel those emotions and I see them and I dive deep into them to find meaning. But I realized, yeah. And that really broke me. That really broke me. You know, it broke me because I lost all sense of self-worth that I had for myself. I didn't appreciate the person I was. And the feeling of just, oh, fuck, dude, I can't cut this shit out. But the feeling of just waking up every morning, gut wrench. Like, I had no purpose of just doing anything. I was waking up on autopilot. I was depressed. I didn't want to wake up. I didn't want to show up at any time of the day. I remember going into work and just standing inside of the units of these buildings, just crying and not being able to regulate myself. And I realized through that process, I looked in the mirror. I realized, I'm like, what am I doing? I was fat. I was broken. But at the same time, for once in my life, it wasn't like a boo me kind of thing. It was like, you gotta figure this out. No matter what, you gotta figure this out. That's when I found God. I remember crying out to God when I was in my bed, and I was like, God, please help me. And yeah, and I remember just picking my feet up. I started to go into a calorie deficit. I started starving myself again for the third time, and then ended up losing a significant amount of weight, but in the most unhealthy way possible. And then I remember after Christmas, and that's when I started running. I started getting back into running because it gave me fulfillment. It gave me some form of like purpose in my life. And through the running, I was able to, and I remember just going out this one night at 10 p.m. on a Wednesday night. It was snowing here in Canada. It was like December, and I started running. And it brought me that sense. It brought me that peace with myself. And I kept on doing it, and I kept doing it every week, and I was like, you know what? I'm gonna do something for myself. I'm gonna sign up for a half marathon. So that time I really was focusing on my development, my nutrition. I was dialed in to the point where I was fixing the things along the way. I wasn't perfect, but I learned a lot about my nutrition and started to fix my food that I was eating to help with my brain and my mental health. It wasn't just losing the weight, it was fixing the mental damage that I had. And after that point, I remember signing up for that half marathon, and I trained like 60-hour weeks. Dude, I was running every single night, working 10, 12 hours in construction, like in the cold weather. I'd come home, tie up my shoes. I remember I've been like running through puddles of ice water and ice, and I had blisters on my feet. My stomach flipped on me. I shit myself a couple times. Learning all those things through endurance training, but I was running like 60-kilometer weeks, literally redlining my RPMs, which I don't advise anyone does in endurance training. But I remember I started to kind of get my bearings towards the end of my prep, and around the last month or so, I really structured out running and learned how to do it. And then I ended up running that half marathon, and my mom and brother came with me. I didn't really have anything. And I crossed the finish line, and I remember looking down at my watch. Like, I was going, dude. I had the AirPods in. I had like throwbacks, like Black Eyed Peas playing. And then I crossed the finish line. I looked, and I ran in an hour and 34 minutes. And I was like, oh my goodness. I couldn't run 5K over 5 months ago. And then I see and I look, and I ran at a 4 minute and 20 pace per kilometer. And I look and I'm like, oh my goodness, like that was like my thing, my sign. Like I was like, wow. And I remember just being so happy on the way back. I got like crumble cookie and Five Guys, and I remember thinking to myself, it's like, I really like this. And it gave me that sense of fulfillment. That gave me a sense. And I remember God at the time, like I was praying all the time, and I was in my word, and I was talking to God, and I was like, thank you, Jesus. I remember a couple of weeks after I was so obsessed with Ironman. I remember this vividly. I was like obsessed with an Ironman, and I went to these plumbers on my site. They had like a party, and I remember talking to this one guy there. He's an electrician as well, and he also did an Ironman. And I remember that night I journaled, I'm going to be an Ironman. I manifested that because I'm in the pursuit of it right now. And then I signed up for my marathon. I was like, I want to do something in between the triathlon right now. And I spent that whole summer grinding, and that's when I started my business. And I was grinding, working in the 34-degree weather, pulling huge feeder cables, doing all this hard labor work, coming home, doing sprint sessions. I'd go to the track. I had everything structured out. My meal plan was on, my water intake, my nutrition protocol, my supplement protocol. I was hitting every session, every single day, just showing up, regardless how I felt. I remember some days I didn't even hit my pace goals, but I was just showing up. And the pursuit of showing up for yourself, regardless of how you feel, is one of the strongest things ever. Battling my mental health, being in a calorie deficit, which I don't advise anyone does, but I was in a calorie deficit for the whole entire time. I was in a deficit, I just got out of it. I was in a deficit for over 12 months. And I ended up just training for this marathon. And I remember in the fall, October this year, I ran the full marathon. And that experience in its own, I can't even describe it in words. But I crossed that finish line, I remember just the pure dopamine, and just I actually felt proud for myself. And I realized I don't need validation from the world. I don't need validation from anyone. It's like, I'm amazing. I remember bawling my eyes out for like 20 minutes walking back to the car with my family. And I look at the watch, and I beat my time goal. I would manifest, journal this every day. I beat my time goal by 25 minutes. And that was that moment where I was like, I got this. And I signed up for my Ironman. I started signing my clients. And I realized that I can do anything I put my mind to. I don't have to be perfect. I don't have to have things figured out. I can struggle along the way. But I know I've developed the character, the stack of undeniable proof, the discipline every single day that no matter what I do, I'm going to show up, regardless of how I feel, regardless of how much I have in the tank. And I built systems in my life. I built habits for myself. I built journaling. I built my mind. I reprogrammed my mind. And am I perfect? Do I struggle? No. But the difference is I actually acknowledge the things that I'm struggling with, and I go dive deep into those emotions and travel and explore. And as a result of that, yeah, I'm in pursuit of my first Ironman right now. I'm training for that. It's in around 109 days from today. And I'm going to crush it because I got God with me. I got myself. And I'll never give up. And to look back and to say, in a year, I've ran 2 marathons, signed up for an Ironman, lost 40 pounds, worked construction, and coached a bunch of clients, helping them lose over 50 pounds. It's a surreal position to be in. And I'm super grateful for it. And if you're seeing this video right now, you don't need to be perfect. You don't need to have everything figured out. You don't need a fortune cookie. You don't need anything like that. Heck, you don't even need to have a perfect meal plan. But what you do need to have is faith in yourself. And what you do need to do is show up for yourself every single day, even if that 1% is getting your feet up out of bed. And from the position I was over a year ago, to the position I'm in now, I can tell you that if I can achieve it, so can you. Thank you for your time.